Hey everyone, welcome to your favorite low-tech music producer, YouTuber, the Afro Hamurai. Today, we're looking at this. So as standard, when you own a Volca, you don't end up with just one. You kind of end up getting, another one, then another one, and then another one. And the Beats was kind of one to add to my lineup, specifically because I wanted an analog drum machine. And that's exactly what it is. So the Volca Beats is a 10-part drum machine. It has 6 analog sounds and then 4 PCM sounds. And with the analog sounds, you have the controls for them right on the front. The PCM speed is the only PCM control that you have, but that's still individual for each sound that you have that's PCM. So you do have a little bit of editing that you can do with it. So what we're going to do in this video is look at the sound of it. We're going to look at how you control it. And then from there, I'll give you my impressions as to whether I think it's good or not and whether I think you should get it. And also maybe do some comparisons between this and the Volca Drum and then this and the TR-6S so that you kind of get an idea of how it stacks up. So let's start off with the sound, and oh boy, this sounds good through headphones. So I quite like the Volca Beats, right? Like, it does have a similar sort of feel, I would think, to the sounds you would get out of an 808, but I think that the combination of its immediacy when it comes to its control, and also just a little bit of its own sort of flavor pushes it over the top. Specifically with the snare sound. The snare is something that when I was doing some research on the internet, people kind of did or didn't like. I quite like it. Yeah, it kind of sounds sometimes a little bit wimpy, but if you mix everything else around it, turn some of your part levels down, and you use creatively that snappy control, even if you turn it all the way down, it has a really cool sort of texture to it, kind of something between a snare and a weird hum sort of thing. The gotcha, however, is that because, this was one of the first ones that was released in 2013, yeah, it only outputs mono. You don't get stereo and you don't get multi-output. I don't really expect multi-output from the Volcas. You can mod it to do it. I'm not going to with this one. Maybe I'll get another one that's really broken and mod that to do multi-output, but for now, there's no real need for me to do so. Let's move on to its effect, because every Volca tends to have some sort of effect or some sort of thing that it does alone. The new bass that has its vacuum tube oscillator, the drum has a wave guide in it, that sounds very good. The modular has the space out reverb thing, that's good. And with the Volca Beats, you have stutter. Now, stutter is a re-trigger effect that I tend to use as sort of like a delay-ish sort of thing. If you use it on the hats, they'll end up like just choking each other, so you don't necessarily want to use it there unless you're using it on, I don't know, close hats or for some sort of effect. But I do very much enjoy it. If you hold down function and then turn the time knob on the Volca Beats, that lets you have the time set up to time divisions rather than just like what seems to be milliseconds or so on. I like the stutter effect. It's limited though. You have everything you'd expect unless you approach this as you would a Volca that's more recent. So for example, with the Volca new bass and with the Volca drum, you have two different colors of the dials. You have the silver or like clear ones that have lights going through them, and then you have the black ones. The black ones are what you set permanently. The silver ones are there to let you like add motions. So I can add automations of things like the decay and the body of the waveguide on the drum in a pattern, or I can change the volume of accents, the sort of LFO movements and so on the new bass and record that into the sequence. With the Volca Beats, that is not the case. Anything that has a white outline, you can record motion for. So those are the two stutter effects and the PCM speed. Everything else that's clear, that's just another way for it to tell you that it's triggered that sound alongside the light showing up at the bottom. It turns some of your part levels down and you use creatively that you don't have the ability to do any sort of ratchet effects or slice effects on anything. You can't set any accent steps. You're pretty much just making a beat. Also, I believe from checking with the active steps that if you set active step, that's not per part, that is for the entire pattern. Step jump also doesn't work the way that you'd expect it. Like the Volca new bass, the Volca drum, you use step jump, the sequence is still running so that when you let go, it's still in time. If you use step jump on the Volca Beats, it will start from that step again. So you kind of got to make sure that you're holding on a lot more to what that timing is and where exactly in the sequence you would be to let go. Otherwise, you'll end up out of time if you use step jump. I'm not going to say this is a terrible sequencer, it's just that the newer Volcas just do better, which you'd hope because they've had time to improve the sequencer. What's great is, from the MIDI implementation chart on the Volca Beats, there's a lot that you can change with MIDI CC, with MIDI note. So if you gave it to either your DAW, maybe set up a Max for Live device, or if you decided to get something like a beat step or a key step from Arturia or any sort of hardware sequencer that can work through MIDI, you'd have a really powerful synth engine right here for making some of your drum sounds. But yeah, it's definitely a sequencer that's 6 years behind what we have currently. So what do I think about the Volca Beats? Overall, a lot of the love that you would have for the Beats comes from its sound, or maybe going in and modifying it to work a bit better for you. If one of those two things are things that you're comfortable with, then the Beats really is a lot more powerful than what it presents itself to be. But even without that, there's still a lot that you get for it, especially when you can pick these up used for less than £100 here in the UK. I also see a lot of potential in using this with my music production. Its MIDI implementation chart gives me ways to control this in the way that I would VSTs, and granted I can't have separate tracks, I could absolutely just set up ways to record each individual note in a separate track and then merge them together. It would be annoying, it would take ages, but I could do it. You could do it. You could record this multi-track into a DAW and then actually mix it. And yeah, its sequencer is limited, but nothing stops me or stops you if you're getting one of these from either sequencing it from your computer or using something like a Beat Step if you wanted to have a hardware sequencer and still make this the only thing that you take with a relatively lightweight setup. But let's compare it. And the first I'm going to compare it with is another drum thing, so not you and not you. I'm sorry, Modular, I still need to learn how to use you. The Volca Drum. So when I originally reviewed my Volca Drum and compared it to the TR-6S, I kind of gave the TR-6S the edge because of its immediacy. But I didn't go as far into how deep the drum actually is, and in fact, using the Volca Beats got me to really appreciate how deep the Volca Drum can be. Yeah, it's a digital synthesizer as opposed to analog. That doesn't make this sound bad, it just sounds, you know, different. The biggest difference I think is that the Volca Beats gives you 10 sounds, whereas the Volca Drum gives you 6 parts, but the 6 parts on the Volca Drum can be anything. You could have it be 6 different flavors of kick if you wanted to. You have a lot more in terms of motion that you're able to do on this. You have pattern chaining, you have slicing. You're able to go in and individually synthesize each layer of each 2-layer sound. So you can really make this sound so different to what you would expect other drum machines to do. This is really a synthesizer for percussion rather than a drum machine, as I maybe gave it credit for before. They might call it the Volca Drum, but it is a synthesizer. Also, it's more modern, so you can use this a lot easier in music production. You can do the whole thing of panning certain sounds to one channel and the other so that you can do your mixing in the DAW instead. Or you can just do everything built in, either or. I would personally find it quite difficult to pick between the two. I think that this has that level of immediacy and has that analog warmth, especially when you're listening to it through headphones. Whereas with the Volca Drum, it is definitely a bit more aggressive and forward and digital. Like, this is definitely forward, has that drivey, distorted sort of feel. This is a little bit smoother and a bit more classic in its sound. If I were to say to get one as your one and only drum machine or drum sound machine, I would pick the Volca Drum because it is just better in every way. It gives you a lot more creativity on the device before you then decide to record it, if you decide to record it. How about this compared to the TR-6S? So with the TR-6S, you get lots of different sounds. You have analog modeled versions of the 808, the 909, the 606, the 707, the 727. It sounds better than my samples that I have that I got from samples from Mars of the 606 and 707 and stuff. You get FM synthesizers. You also have some samples in there as well from other stuff in case you need it. This sounds like this. It's analog, and it has that really nice analog feel to it, but it sounds like this, and this is the only sound you're going to get from it. So if the sound you like from it is this, and you can work with sequencing it and being really creative in that sort of way to get the most out of it, then get this. They are definitely two very different things, and I would say the TR-6S does still have more in common with the Volca Drum, based off of the fact that they have the versatility of creating different sounds than the TR-6S does with the Volca Beats. If I were to kind of equate it, the Volca Beats is almost like one of the analog modeled synthesizers within the TR-6S. Like, it's analog rather than being analog modeled, but it's kind of like if you just had one of those sounds, right? If you have no need for a Roland machine or a Roland sound-alike, if you have samples and you're happy with your samples and you wanted to pick between the two of them, I would say the Volca Beats, because you can get a better sampler than the TR-6S. But if what you're looking for is something that has the ability to sample, do some drum synthesis, has, in my opinion, the best sequencer of the three by way of being approachable and being able to do some really cool chaining and so on, as well as really cool editing while it's still being chained, yeah, the TR-6S is most probably what you want to get. I think just on its own, it's really cool to have because it is an analog synthesizer. It's a small analog synth. I think this is, in fact, the only analog synthesizer I own other than the Minilog. So I have a Minilog XD, and that costs at least 4 or 5 times as much as this did for me. And I have this. It's analog. I like it, and it also looks really nice, so, you know, that's a plus side too. But that brings us to the end of today's Volca Beats review. Do you agree with me? If you do, or you don't, feel free to tell me in the comments. I like reading comments. I am not gonna try and say I'm gonna definitely upload a certain amount because work usually comes up, but I have got a new computer, so I can get my editing done relatively quickly. So maybe I'm gonna be able to get some videos done like at least twice a month, maybe once every fortnight. Let me know what you want to see. I've been thinking about maybe doing some sort of deep dive into the digitone once I actually have a bit more time to learn it. Maybe having a look at my new audio interface and doing a review of that as well. I'm thinking of definitely doing some more dining table sessions because that would be quite fun. So, you know, let me know what you want to see. Thank you for watching. If you want to stick around, you can stick around. Feel free to subscribe and all of that. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Cool.